In 1931, a mysterious African teacher, who many believed could foresee the future, shared a secret knowledge with a small group of people. The curious thing is that over time, all of them achieved a wealth that is hard to explain. It wasn't because they worked more hours, nor because they were luckier than others. They simply learned something that you're about to discover in the next few minutes. And if this video appeared in front of you right now, maybe there's a much deeper reason than you imagine. Maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe it's your moment. Take a pause for a moment. It doesn't matter if you're lying down at the office, traveling by bus, or even hiding in the bathroom for 5 minutes to disconnect from the world. Stop. Because what you're about to hear is not meant to be just another video on the internet. It's a message that, in some ways, seemed to be waiting for you. If you weren't ready to receive it, you probably never would have made it this far. I want to ask you something very simple. Place your left hand over your heart. Not on your chest, but right where you feel life beating. Feel that rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Each heartbeat seems to remind you of a truth you often forget. You are still here. There is still time. You weren't late for anything. You arrived exactly when you were supposed to. Now, without moving your hand, repeat these words to yourself, out loud or silently. I know that I was chosen. I'm already receiving. It's already done. Don't say them like someone reading a sign on the street. Feel every sentence. Imagine that someone who knows your story and your deepest wounds whispers it to you just when you need it most. Did you do it? Then you just took a step that can change how you'll live today. Now write in the comments. The universe already said yes. It is done. Don't see it as just any phrase. Consider it a statement of intent. The moment you stop chasing things and start opening yourself up to receive them, do it before you continue. Because what comes next will have a completely different meaning if you've already made that small gesture of trust. But before we continue, I need you to listen carefully. Not just with your ears, but with everything you are. You didn't find this video by accident. It didn't show up just because an algorithm decided to show it to you. There is an ancient idea present in many spiritual traditions that the right information comes when the right person is ready to receive it. And that might be exactly what's happening to you right now. The great masters of the past shared a conviction that few understood. They believed that the universe does not work by chance, that every encounter, every unexpected conversation, every book opened at just the right moment, or every video that appears when you are searching for answers the most, is part of an order, invisible, which drives each person toward their growth and abundance. Today you will learn the story of a character that almost no one talks about, but whose influence marked modern spiritual thought in a surprising way. His name was Abdullah. He lived discreetly in New York, away from the spotlight, teaching a few, while the rest of the world didn't even know who he was. And yet his teachings ended up transforming the lives of millions of people who never even heard his name. His story is one of those that leaves a mark. Abdullah was born in North Africa into a deeply Orthodox Jewish family. He grew up surrounded by Hebrew, by ancient scriptures, and by a worldview where spirituality was not a theory, but a way of life. But since he was a child, he seemed different. While other children ran after a ball or got into mischief, he preferred to remain silent and observe. He paid attention to the wind, to the spaces between words, and to things that no one else seemed to notice, as if he were listening to a secret conversation between the universe and existence. He said he felt the presence of an invisible law that holds all of creation together. It is not known for sure when he arrived in the United States. What is recorded in the accounts of Neville Goddard is that During the 1920s, Abdullah was already living in New York on West 72nd Street, in a Harlem full of music, art, poetry, and an intense spiritual effervescence. It was a place where jazz filled the streets, but where ancient traditions and knowledge also circulated. These rarely appeared in books. He mastered Hebrew with extraordinary ease, and he had such a deep knowledge of Kabbalah that surprised even the most experienced scholars. In fact, many rabbis would come to consult him seeking answers. They would arrive with texts, questions, and theories. He would respond with a calmness that unsettled anyone. However, among all that ancient knowledge, he had discovered something even more powerful. A spiritual law so simple that it made those who complicated everything uncomfortable. So accessible that it seemed impossible to believe in it. And perhaps precisely because of that, very few managed to understand it. It was the year 1931. New York was suffering the devastating impact of the Great Depression. The streets were full of uncertainty. Entire families died. Many lost their homes. And millions of people were struggling just to survive. In the midst of that situation, a young dancer named Neville Goddard appeared. He was born in Barbados and had come to America pursuing the dream of art and dance. But the reality was very different. He was broke, confused, and felt like his life had lost its direction. And without knowing it, he was about to meet the man who would change his destiny forever. A friend practically had to insist that he attend a meeting where a teacher, whose name almost no one dared to mention, would be speaking. Neville arrived late. He settled in the last row, with the attitude of someone who had already decided he was going to waste his time. He was skeptical, tired, and counting the minutes until he could leave without drawing attention. But when the talk ended, something happened that he could never erase from his memory. Abdullah crossed the entire room without hesitating for a single second. He walked straight toward Neville as if he had recognized him among hundreds of people. He stopped in front of him, looked him straight in the eye, and extended his hand. Then he spoke a few words that seemed to stop time. "Neville, you're 6 months late." Neville was completely motionless. He had never seen that man before. He didn't even know who he really was. How could he know his name? And why was he talking about a delay when he didn't even intend to be there? Abdullah just smiled. Years later, Neville would describe that smile as the kind someone has when they already know the ending of a movie, while everyone else is just watching. Later, he said, "The brothers told me you would come. I've waited 6 months for you. Now that you have finally arrived, I will stay with you until I give you everything I came to give you." Neville didn't understand anything. His mind was searching for a logical explanation, but deep inside, something different happened. A silent certainty, impossible to explain, made him feel that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And maybe the same thing is happening to you while you listen to this story. Just as Abdullah was waiting for Neville, maybe this moment has also been waiting for you for a long time. Neville studied alongside Abdullah, learned Hebrew, explored the Kabbalah, and delved into ancient spiritual teachings. However, the most important knowledge was never found in a book. It was a way of living. A conviction so absolute that it seemed to radiate from every gesture of the master. The external reality has no power over the internal reality. In an era marked by racial segregation in the United States, when a black man could barely access certain public spaces, Abdullah acted as if those limitations simply did not exist. He would enter theaters, walk up to the ticket booth, and say with complete naturalness, "I want 2 seats in the center, not too far back." He didn't beg. He didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He declared. And surprisingly, he got what he asked for. Again and again. Not because the rules had changed, but because, according to those who knew him, He never accepted those rules within his own consciousness. He lived with such a solid certainty that the world seemed to reorganize itself around him, as if reality had no choice but to catch up. That was what he really taught Neville. It wasn't a secret technique, nor a psychological trick. It was a much deeper idea. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are the one who shapes them. And when you come to know it with the same certainty with which you know the sun will rise again tomorrow, life begins to reflect what was first born inside you. Now, there's a detail about the famous story of Barbados that almost no one tells. Everyone knows the ending, but few talk about what happened before. And that's exactly where the most important part lies. It was December 1933, in the midst of the Great Depression. Neville came to Abdullah completely dejected. He barely had enough money to survive, and the idea of returning to Barbados to spend Christmas with his family seemed like an impossible fantasy. With a trembling voice, he confessed, "I want to go back to Barbados, but I don't have any money." "There's no way." Abdullah watched him with absolute calm and replied with something that completely puzzled his student. "Who says you're going to go? You're already in Barbados. Now dress yourself with Barbados. Put on the island as if it were your own clothes." Neville tried to explain reality to him. He wanted to talk about accounts, about money, and about all the reasons why that was impossible. Then Abdullah did something that might seem abrupt. He got up, walked to his study, and closed the door in her face. No arguing, no further explanations. He just closed the door. And in that instant, Neville understood the message. He wasn't closing off a room. He was shutting out doubt. He was showing her that a truth you accept doesn't need to be defended or debated. That night, Neville returned to his small apartment, cold and silent. And then came the battle that almost no one mentions when talking about manifestation. His mind kept repeating, "This is absurd. You have no money, you have no ticket, you're not going to Barbados." Logic was screaming louder and louder, and he had to choose: listen to the voice of circumstances, or trust in the words of his master. He chose to trust. He lay down. He closed his eyes and stopped imagining Barbados as a distant dream. He began to feel that he was already there. He felt the warmth of the sun on his skin. He sensed the Caribbean breeze. He heard the voices of his family as if they were just a few meters away. Not as a fantasy, as a reality that had not fully become real yet, and he fell asleep in that state, not walking toward the end, but living from the end. Less than a week later, on December 4, 1933, something unexpected happened. Neville received a letter from his brother Cecil. Inside, there was cash and a ticket to travel to Barbados. His brother explained that he had felt the urge to bring the whole family together for the holidays, as if something had moved the pieces without anyone noticing. When Neville arrived at the port, he had a third-class ticket, but just before boarding, the agent informed him, "Mr. Goddard, there was a cancellation. You will travel in first class." Exactly as Abdullah had stated, no changes, no caveats. Exactly. And here comes another fact that is almost never mentioned. Abdullah didn't just influence Neville Goddard. Sometimes reality seems to be the last to get the message. Now I want to tell you the story of a woman, a recent story. A story that, according to those who believe in these teachings, seems to follow the same pattern that Abdullah used to teach his students. People change, but there are those who claim that the law remains unchanged. Her name was Elena. It was 2019, just before the whole world changed forever. She was 52 years old, 3 children, and a debt that exceeded $48,000 after a divorce which left her emotionally and financially devastated. She lived in a small apartment in Miami and worked endless hours at 2 different jobs that barely covered the basics. Every night, she cried before going to sleep. It wasn't a dramatic cry. It was that silent exhaustion that only someone who has given everything they have and still feels like they're losing the battle can understand. One early morning, unable to fall asleep, he stumbled upon a lecture by Neville Goddard, perhaps by chance or maybe not so much by chance. He listened to it in its entirety, and at some point the story of Abdullah came up. The image of that teacher closing a door to keep doubt from entering was etched in his mind. Something stirred inside her, something that had been dormant for years. That very night, she made a decision that anyone would have considered absurd. But probably, Abdullah would have smiled if he had heard it. She decided that her debts were already paid. Not that she expected to pay them, not that she would pay them someday, but rather deep in her consciousness, they no longer existed. For 4 weeks, she practiced exactly that idea. Every night, in that moment between being awake and falling asleep, when the rational mind starts to let go, she allowed herself to feel completely free. She didn't imagine a better future. She lived in that future. She woke up the next day with the calm of someone who knows everything is settled. Even though the bank kept sending notifications, much less spiritual ones, and of course doubt appeared over and over again. Every time that happened, Elena did something curious. She looked for the nearest door. She closed it firmly, and she said, "This is closed. There's nothing more to discuss. It's already done." She turned that gesture into a physical reminder of the decision she had made. 5 weeks later, she received an unexpected call. A lawyer informed her that a distant uncle, with whom she barely had a relationship, had passed away and had included her in his will. The inheritance amounted to $62,000 more than she needed to solve her situation. Elena didn't cry because the money arrived. She cried because she felt she had just confirmed a truth she had only heard before in a lecture. She understood, at least for her, that the law worked. That the universe does not favor a privileged few. It responds to those who learn to receive. And that is precisely the teaching that, according to Neville, Abdullah conveyed to his disciples. A method that seems simple but is deeply demanding in practice. 3 steps. 3 principles that he rarely shared with just anyone, only with those he considered ready. And if you've made it this far, maybe it's worth knowing them. The first was the declaration from the fulfilled state. Abdullah would immediately correct anyone who said, "I want money. I need abundance. I hope things get better." For him, those phrases actually reinforced the very absence the person wanted to overcome. Instead, he taught people to speak from a reality that was already assumed. "I don't want to go back to Barbados. I'm already in Barbados. I don't expect prosperity. I already live in prosperity. I'm not seeking abundance. I am abundance." The difference seems minimal, but according to his view, it completely changes the place from which consciousness operates. It's not about naive optimism. It's about identifying with the cause, not the effect. Because for Abdullah, consciousness creates first and the world simply reflects afterward. The second step was to close the door. And this might be the most uncomfortable of all. Because after any declaration, doubt always appears. The mind starts to ask questions. It starts to remember bills, problems, and limitations. Abdullah never promised that would disappear. He only taught that one could choose not to feed that inner dialogue. That's why he recommended a very specific symbolic act, closing a door, literally. And as you close it, repeat, "I close the door to all doubt. I close the door to any appearance that contradicts my truth. My decision is sealed." Every time fear comes back, you close the door again, and again, and again, as many times as it takes. Because a conviction held with persistence eventually becomes a certainty. And according to these teachings, every manifestation is born precisely from that certainty. The third step was the most difficult: to live from the fulfilled end. It's not enough to spend 5 minutes a day visualizing a different life and then spend the rest of the day worrying about everything. You have to start living inwardly as the version of yourself that already lives that reality. How does someone who already feels abundant walk? How do they make decisions? How do they face an unexpected problem? How do they look at the future? It's not about pretending, it's about feeling that this identity already exists, that abundance is already a part of you, and that the physical world sooner or later will end up reflecting what first changed inside. On one occasion, Neville asked a question that probably all of us have asked ourselves at some point. If this law exists, why doesn't everyone get results? Abdullah's answer was as brief as it was forceful. Because they believe that they believe. And he added, but believing that you believe is not believing. To believe, he said, is to know. To know with the same naturalness with which you know that an object will fall if you let it go. No one does a daily experiment to check gravity. You simply take it for granted. According to Abdullah, when a person reaches that same level of conviction about their inner reality, external circumstances end up aligning with it, not as a miracle, but as an inevitable consequence. He also left a phrase that Neville would repeat for years. The universe does not respond to the smartest, nor to the one who works the hardest, not even to the one who deserves it the most. It responds to the one who fully assumes a reality and remains in it. And maybe that's why you've kept listening up to this point. Maybe because there's something inside you looking for a different way to look at life. While you were listening to this story, you might have felt an intuition that's hard to explain, a strange feeling, as if something started to move inside you. Maybe in the next few days, an unexpected idea will appear, a different conversation, an opportunity that seemed impossible, or simply a new way to interpret what you used to take for granted. Those who follow these teachings would say that coincidences don't exist, only the law acting in silence, and that the real work is to hold on to the decision you've made, even when your eyes still can't see. Before saying goodbye to Neville, Abdullah left him with a reflection that sums up his entire philosophy. He told him that what he taught was not a method for accumulating things, nor for feeding the ego. It was a path to remember who you really are. Because when you understand the true power of consciousness, abundance stops being the goal. It simply becomes a consequence. True transformation happens inside first, and everything else comes afterward. Think about this for a moment. What led you to listen to this story? What were you really looking for? Maybe it wasn't money, maybe it was hope, maybe a new possibility, maybe a different explanation, maybe just a hard-to-name intuition that told you, listen to this, and here you are. There are people who reach this point feeling completely exhausted, in debt, afraid, with the feeling that they've tried everything and still can't find a way out. If that's your situation, remember this. Neville met Abdullah at one of the most difficult moments of his life, and the teacher didn't tell him to work harder. He didn't ask him to fight twice as hard. He simply made him see a different reality. Right now, there are two paths. In one, you close this video, you continue with your routine, and everything stays the same. In the other, you decide to experience a new way of thinking. You don't need to do it perfectly. No one starts out believing 100%. You just need to take the first step. Because according to Abdullah, whoever truly begins has already started the change. And maybe that's the most powerful idea in this whole story. That the end is not a place you arrive at. It's a state you choose to live from.